I had never been the kind of man to go through my wife's things. Never once checked her emails, never scrolled through her messages when she left her phone unattended. I believed in trust, believed that when two people build a life together, shared a home, a future, that meant something. Maybe that made me naive. Maybe that made me a damn fool. Looking back, I wonder how long it had been happening right under my nose. How many nights had I sat across from her at the dinner table, completely oblivious while she was sneaking around behind my back? How many times had I kissed her goodnight, not realizing I was kissing the lips of a liar? The night everything unraveled did not feel like some major turning point. There was no ominous warning, no gut feeling that told me my world was about to cave in. It was just another evening. She had made spaghetti, the same way she always did. Too much garlic, not enough salt. We ate in front of the television, watching one of those sitcoms she liked, the kind with a laugh track that did most of the work for the audience. She chuckled a few times, that familiar, soft laugh I had once loved. I was too drained from work to pay much attention, my mind already drifting toward the weekend. Then she stretched, stood up, and said she was going to take a shower. I barely glanced at her as she walked toward the stairs, humming under her breath. And then her phone lit up. It buzzed once against the countertop. I would not have thought twice about it. Normally, I would have ignored it completely. But something about the way the screen glowed in the dim kitchen caught my attention. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was sheer dumb luck. Or maybe I had been blind for too damn long, and the universe had finally decided to open my eyes. Without thinking, I leaned forward just a glance, just curious. And there it was. A message. Just a few words. Nothing elaborate. Nothing poetic. When are you going to tell him the truth? That was it. A simple question, typed out in white letters on a blue background, like it was not about to take a wrecking ball to my entire life. I stared at it. At first, my brain moved slow, sluggish, like it was refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. I read it again, and then the weight of it crashed down on me like a hammer to the chest. There was no good explanation for a message like that. None. The only truth she would have to tell me was the kind that shattered marriages, the kind that turned love into resentment, the kind that made men do things they never thought they were capable of. I felt the anger rise fast, sharp, cutting through me like a blade. My pulse thundered in my ears, a steady, relentless drumbeat. My grip tightened around the beer bottle in my hand, and for a second, I thought about hurling it against the wall, just to hear something break, just to have a sound louder than the storm brewing inside me. I could feel the shift happening. The transformation from a man I was 5 minutes ago to the man I was right now. Because nothing would ever be the same again. Nothing. I reached for the phone, my fingers wrapping around the cold metal. The screen dimmed, the message disappearing, but I had already seen enough. I did not need to check the name. I did not need to know who sent it. I already knew exactly what it meant. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife even deeper. Footsteps. Soft. Unrushed. She was coming back. I turned my head as she stepped into the kitchen, still drying her damp hair with a towel, her skin flushed from the heat of the shower. She looked at me, then at the phone in my hand. And right there, in that fleeting instant, I saw it. Panic. She tried to hide it fast, forcing her expression into something neutral. But she was not quick enough. That 1 second was all I needed. I knew, and she knew that I knew. Her lips parted slightly like she was about to say something, but nothing came out. Her fingers clutched the towel a little tighter, knuckles turning white. I set the phone down, slowly, deliberately. The tension in the room was suffocating, thick enough to drown in. Finally, she spoke. Everything okay? Her voice was too calm, too measured, like she had rehearsed it. I did not answer. I did not need to, because this was not a misunderstanding. This was not something she could explain away. This was war. The silence stretched, pressing down on the room, wrapping around us like a vice. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, the low hum of the refrigerator, the distant chatter from the TV, still playing in the other room. But none of it mattered. The only thing that existed in that moment was the phone on the counter, the message, and the woman standing in front of me, the woman I thought I knew. She shifted under my stare, her eyes darting between my face and the phone. Her fingers curled tighter around the towel, her breathing just a little quicker now, barely noticeable. But I noticed. She could feel it, that creeping sense of doom. And still, she tried to play it off. Did something happen? Her tone was light, casual, too casual, like she was talking about misplacing her keys or forgetting to buy milk. I did not answer. I just stood there, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. The rage was simmering, bubbling just beneath the surface, but I refused to explode. Not yet. She took a step closer, forcing a smile onto her lips. Babe, what is wrong? And that was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The fake concern in her voice, the way she tried to act normal, as if I had not just seen proof that she was lying to my face, sent a bolt of fury through me so intense I had to remind myself to breathe. I grabbed the phone and turned the screen toward her, the message still sitting there, clear as day. When are you going to tell him the truth? Her face paled. Not much, but enough. A slight twitch in her jaw, the way her lips pressed together just a little too tightly. It was a small reaction, almost imperceptible. But I saw it, and in that moment I knew. She was guilty. She blinked quickly, shaking her head like I was being ridiculous. What is this about? A part of me admired the effort, the sheer audacity of it. To stand there, look me in the eye, and pretend like she did not know exactly what was happening. But I was not an idiot, and I sure as hell was not going to let her play me for one. I exhaled slowly, my voice steady. You tell me. She let out a small, nervous laugh, rubbing the back of her neck. I do not even know what this is. Cut the crap. My voice came out sharp, colder than I expected. Who sent it? She hesitated, just for a second, but that second told me everything. And then, she let out a slow breath, shaking her head. It is not what you think. That sentence. That goddamn sentence. The universal excuse of the guilty. I felt my grip tighten around the phone, my jaw clenching so hard it hurt. Then why do you not tell me what it is? And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. For all the years I had given her. For every moment I had wasted on a woman who did not deserve it. I took a step back, shaking my head, forcing my voice to stay steady. How long? She swallowed hard, looking anywhere but at me. It was not. How long? Her eyes flickered up to mine, and for the first time that night, I saw it. Real fear. She hesitated, her lips trembling. Then, finally, 3 months, she admitted. 3 months. 90 days. Almost 100 mornings of waking up beside me, kissing me goodbye, then walking out that door and slipping into someone else's arms. I clenched my fists, my whole body rigid from the effort of keeping myself under control. I did not trust myself to speak. I did not even trust myself to stay in the same room as her. Because if I did, if I looked at her for one more second, I was going to do something I would regret. So I turned, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. The drive to nowhere. I did not know where I was going. I did not care. The night swallowed me as I sped through the empty streets, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. Streetlights flickered past in long, hazy streaks, but I barely saw them. My mind was stuck in that kitchen, on that message, on the way she had stood there, lying to my face like it was the easiest thing in the world. 3 months. That number burned itself into my brain like a scar. 3 months of deception. 3 months of sharing my bed, my home, my life, while giving herself to someone else. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I should have seen it. That is what people always say, right? The signs are always there, if you just open your damn eyes. Had she been coming home later than usual? Had she been glued to her phone, smiling at texts that were not for me? Had she been distant, distracted, less present? Maybe, but I had not wanted to see it. Because who in their right mind wants to believe that the person they build a life with is capable of such a betrayal? The thought had never even crossed my mind. Not once. I had trusted her. Completely. And now, I was nothing more than a goddamn joke. The rage inside me boiled over. My foot pressed down on the gas pedal, the engine roaring, the speedometer needle climbing. I barely noticed. The world outside blurred, my own pulse thundering in my ears. I wanted to hurt something, break something, tear something apart with my bare hands. And then, him. The thought came out of nowhere, sharp and violent. The bastard from her office. The man who had been with my wife. I did not even know his name yet, but it did not matter. I was going to find out. And when I did, I shook my head, gripping the wheel tighter, forcing a breath through my nose. I could not go there. Not yet. I needed a plan. I could not just storm into her office tomorrow and start throwing punches. No, that would be too easy and too stupid. I needed to think. I needed to know everything. Because one thing was for certain, if she thought she was going to get away with this, she was dead wrong. The return home. I did not go far. Maybe a few miles before I finally pulled into some empty parking lot and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to get a grip on myself. But no matter how many deep breaths I took, no matter how many times I flexed and unflexed my fingers, the rage stayed. It sat inside me, simmering, waiting. I knew I could not stay out all night. As much as I wanted to disappear into the dark and pretend none of this was real, I was not going to give her the satisfaction of thinking I was running away. So after about an hour of sitting in that damn car, I turned around and drove home. The house no longer felt like mine. When I walked through the front door, the air felt wrong. Heavy. Stained. Like the walls themselves knew what she had done. She was sitting on the couch, knees pulled up to her chest, eyes swollen and red. She had been crying. Probably the entire time I was gone. Good. She jumped slightly when she saw me, wiping at her face like that would somehow erase everything. I did not know if you were coming back, she whispered. I said nothing. I walked right past her, straight into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and twisted off the cap. She watched me in silence. I could feel her staring, waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to yell, waiting for me to break down. I did none of those things. I just leaned against the counter, took a slow sip, and stared at her. Let her squirm. Finally, she broke. I am sorry, she whispered. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Sorry, I repeated, rolling the word over my tongue like it was foreign. That is it. That is all you have got. Her chin trembled. I never meant for this to happen. Another laugh. This one sharper. Colder. Never meant for it to happen. I let out a slow exhale, shaking my head. What? Did you trip and fall on his? Stop. Her voice cracked, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Please, just let me explain. I wanted to throw the bottle against the wall. I wanted to hear it shatter, splinter, explode into 1,000 useless pieces. Instead, I set it down with a slow, deliberate motion and crossed my arms. Go ahead, I said. Explain. Tell me why you spent 3 months screwing someone behind my back. I would love to hear it. She sniffled, looking down at her lap. I was lonely. The rage inside me ignited. Lonely. That single word set my blood boiling all over again. Lonely, I echoed, my voice dangerously low. You were lonely? She nodded quickly, wiping at her nose. You have been so busy with work lately. We barely talk anymore. I felt like I was invisible. I took a slow, controlled breath. I had to, because if I did not, I was going to say something I could not take back. You felt invisible, I said finally. So, instead of talking to me, instead of telling me how you felt, you decided to screw your coworker? She flinched. It was not like that. It was exactly like that. Tears streamed down her face now. I swear to you, it did not mean anything. I held up a hand. Stop talking. She shut her mouth instantly. I pushed off the counter, stepping closer. Did he know about me? She blinked. What? I clenched my jaw. Did he know you were married? She hesitated, just long enough to answer my question. Yes, he knew, and he did it anyway. I turned away, dragging a hand down my face, trying to keep myself from exploding. That bastard. That spineless excuse for a man. He had gone after my wife. Had taken something that was never his. Had helped her make a fool out of me. And now, he was probably sitting somewhere, maybe in his own home, maybe in some bar, completely unaware that his world was about to be ripped apart. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. No, he was not getting away with this. Neither of them were. I turned back to her, my voice eerily calm. What is his name? She blinked, looking up at me. What? You heard me. My eyes locked onto hers. Tell me his name. She shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her face. No, tell me his damn name. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, finally, she whispered it. And just like that, something inside me changed. Her voice barely carried through the thick silence in the room, but I had heard it loud and clear. Mark. I did not know Mark. Not personally, but I knew that name meant something now. That name had ruined my marriage. I repeated it, rolling it over my tongue, feeling the weight of it, testing it. Mark, I said slowly, watching her flinch. Her fingers twisted in the fabric of her pajama pants, her whole body tense, waiting. It does not matter, she muttered. I laughed, a slow, cold chuckle. She still thought she had some control. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the counter, locking eyes with her. Oh, it matters. It matters a whole lot. Her breath hitched, and her hands trembled in her lap. Please, I do not want you to do anything crazy. Crazy. That was rich. She had spent 3 months lying to my face, sneaking around behind my back, treating our marriage like it was some disposable thing. And now she was worried about me, doing something crazy? She had no idea who she was dealing with. I tilted my head. Oh, you did not want me to do anything crazy. I echoed. You mean like sleeping with your coworker behind my back? She squeezed her eyes shut. I know, I messed up, okay? Her voice cracked. I did not need you to keep rubbing it in. I straightened, pushing off the counter. Oh, you do not. I took another sip of my beer, swallowing down the urge to throw the bottle against the wall. That is too bad, because I do not plan on stopping anytime soon. Her lip trembled. I did not want to hear it. I snapped. I do not care about your excuses. I just want one thing from you. She hesitated, shoulders curling in like she was trying to make herself smaller. What? I set the bottle down, hard enough that it made a sharp clinking sound against the counter. Then, slowly, deliberately, I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. I want you to call him. The call that changed everything. Her entire body went rigid. WH what? You heard me. I tapped the screen. Call him. Right now. She shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. No, I cannot. You can, I said. And you will. She was breathing faster now, chest rising and falling with each frantic inhale. Please, just let me explain first. No. I stepped closer, towering over her. You have had 3 months to explain. Now you're going to do something for me. Her eyes darted to the phone, then back to me. I do not. I gave her a slow, deliberate smile. Either you call him, or I will. Your choice. Her breath hitched. You do not even know his number. I shrugged. Then I guess I will just show up at your office and start asking around. The blood drained from her face. Good. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely afraid. She had spent months lying to me, playing me for a fool, thinking she could keep her dirty little secret buried forever. But the second that message popped up on her phone, the moment I knew the entire foundation of her affair had crumbled. Now, she had 2 options. Either she gave me what I wanted, or I was going to dig it up myself. Her lip quivered. He does not deserve this. I barked out a sharp laugh. Oh, he does not deserve this. I took another step forward, forcing her to look up at me. Tell me, does he have a wife? A girlfriend? She hesitated. No, but then he sure as hell deserves this, I growled. He knew you were married. He knew exactly what he was doing. He deserves everything that is coming to him. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone. She hesitated again, staring down at the screen like it was a live bomb. I crossed my arms. You are running out of time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she took a deep, shaky breath and dialed. The moment of truth. The first ring felt like thunder in the silent room. The second dragged out even longer. Then, a voice. His voice. Hey, babe. Babe. The casualness of it, the familiarity in his tone, it made my blood boil. She opened her mouth, but before she could get a single word out, I reached forward and snatched the phone from her hand. Hey, Mark. I said smoothly, voice dripping with something dark and dangerous. Guess who? Silence. Then, a nervous chuckle. Who is this? I grinned. Oh, come on, buddy. Do not tell me you do not recognize your best friend's voice. More silence. I could hear the gears turning in his head, the panic setting in. And then, he did something that sealed his fate. He hung up. I stared at the phone, the empty call screen glowing back at me. Slowly, I turned to my wife. She was shaking. Tears streamed down her face. And for the first time all night, she knew there was no way out of this. I stepped out of the office, breathing deep, forcing the fire inside me to settle. My hands were still shaking from the rush, from the sheer, raw satisfaction of watching him crumble beneath my fists. But this wasn't over. Not yet. As I walked through the dimly lit office, I passed the kid who had let me in. He was standing awkwardly by the copy machine, pretending not to have heard the commotion. His eyes darted up as I passed, full of questions he'd never have the guts to ask. I gave him a look that told him to keep his mouth shut. By the time I reached my truck, my knuckles were throbbing. A dull, pulsing ache. I glanced down, flexing my fingers. A little blood. A little swelling. Nothing I couldn't handle. I had done what I came here to do. But there was still one more person left to deal with. Emily. The drive home was a blur, my mind running through 100 different scenarios. Would she be waiting up? Would she try to explain herself again, to twist the story into something I could stomach? Would she still think she had a chance at fixing this? By the time I pulled into the driveway, my heart had settled into a cold, steady rhythm. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been. I had burned through the worst of it. Now I was just done. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me with a quiet finality. Emily was there, sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a half-empty glass of wine. Her eyes were red, swollen. She had been crying. Good. She looked up as I walked in, her lips parting, like she was about to speak. I held up a hand. Don't. She shut her mouth. I walked past her to the fridge, grabbed a beer, twisted off the cap, took a slow sip, feeling the cool burn slide down my throat. Then, finally, I looked at her. I want to see him, I said, my voice even. She flinched. You what? You heard me. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. What did you do? I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. We had a little talk. She swallowed hard. Did you hurt him? I tilted my head. Do you care? Her jaw tensed, but she didn't answer. I took another sip, then set the bottle down on the counter. He's quitting. She blinked, confused. What? He's quitting, I repeated. Tomorrow morning, he's walking into HR and resigning. Her eyes widened. You made him quit. I gave him a choice, I said, shrugging. And he made the right one. She exhaled shakily, looking down at the table, her fingers rubbing circles against the glass. I don't even know what to say. There's nothing left to say. She bit her lip, looking up at me again. So what now? I let the silence stretch between us. Then, finally, I gave her the truth. I'm leaving. Her whole body stiffened. Wait, what? I straightened, grabbing my beer again, taking my time before answering. I packed before I left. I didn't feel like sticking around any longer than I had to. Tears welled up in her eyes. No, please, just wait. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back slightly. Please don't do this. I know I screwed up. I know I. She broke off, running a shaking hand through her hair. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to counseling. I'll quit my job. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. You still think this is something you can fix? She looked desperate now. Desperate in a way she hadn't before. I love you. I scoffed. You don't even know what love is. She took a step forward, reaching for me. Please, just give me another chance. I stepped back. She froze. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. You know what the worst part is? She swallowed. What? I believed you. My voice was quiet now, steady, resigned. For 10 years, I believed in you. I trusted you. I thought we were a team. And the whole time, you were just... I let out a breath, my hands tightening into fists. You were just waiting for something better. Tears slid down her cheeks. That's not true. I shrugged. Doesn't really matter anymore. She took another shaky step forward. Please don't go. I tilted my head. Tell me, Emily, when you were with him, did you ever think about me? Even once. She opened her mouth, hesitated, and in that hesitation I got my answer. I smiled. That cold, knowing smile that let her know she had lost. Goodbye, Emily. I turned, walked toward the door. She didn't stop me this time. She just stood there, watching as I stepped outside. As I walked to my truck, as I climbed in, shut the door, and pulled away from the house we had built together. She was just a fading figure in the rearview mirror now. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. I took a step back, shaking my head. There's nothing left to try. My voice was hollow, distant, like I was watching this moment from the outside. You didn't just cheat, Emily. You killed us. Her face twisted in agony, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I know I hurt you, she choked out. I know I messed up, but I love you. That hasn't changed. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound barely resembling anything human. Hasn't changed, I echoed, staring at her in disbelief. You spent 3 months sneaking around, lying to me every single day, and you think love has anything to do with that. She shook her head frantically. It was a mistake. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. No, Emily, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something in anger and regretting it. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again, you chose him. She let out a quiet sob, her hands trembling at her sides. I don't want to lose you. I studied her for a long moment, trying to find the woman I had once loved in the wreckage of who she had become. But she wasn't there. Not anymore. I had spent years believing we were unbreakable, that no matter what life threw at us, we would weather the storm together. But I had been wrong. So wrong. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had let me believe in something that was never real. I already lost you, I said quietly. The moment you let him touch you, I lost you. She gasped softly, like my words physically hurt her, like she had the right to feel pain in this moment. I turned away, walking toward the bedroom. I didn't need to be here anymore. There was nothing left for me in this house. It wasn't a home. It was just a crime scene, littered with the ghosts of what we used to be. Where are you going? She asked desperately. I didn't look back. I'm leaving. Panic filled her voice. No, please, just wait. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can. I turned sharply, cutting her off with a look that made her freeze. Emily, I said, my voice steel. You don't get to decide what happens next. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. She was shaking now, her whole body trembling like a leaf in the wind. I'll do anything, she whispered. Please just don't walk away. I let out a slow, controlled breath. You should have thought about that before. I grabbed my bag, the one I had packed earlier, the one that held only what I needed. Everything else, every memory, every piece of our life together, I was leaving behind. I moved toward the door, my heart hammering, but my mind was clear. This was it. This was the end. I reached for the handle, but her voice stopped me one last time. Do you still love me? She asked, barely above a whisper. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Once I would have given anything to hear her ask that. Once I would have dropped everything to reassure her. But that man was gone. I opened my eyes, looked at her one last time, and told her the only truth I had left. I don't know. And then I walked out the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap, sharp and unforgiving. I inhaled deeply, letting it fill my lungs, clear my mind. I wasn't sure where I was going. I just knew I was never coming back. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. As I drove down the empty road, the weight on my chest started to lift. It was strange, really. I had expected to feel shattered, to be drowning in heartbreak. But all I felt was clarity. A sharp, undeniable realization that I had been holding on to something that had been rotting for months, maybe longer. The radio hummed softly in the background, some old country song about love gone wrong. Fitting. I let it play, rolling the window down and letting the cool night air whip against my face. I thought about the last look in her eyes, the desperation, the regret. It was almost enough to make me pause. Almost. But then I reminded myself of the past 3 months. The lies. The sneaking around. The whispered phone calls when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The way she smiled at me at breakfast, kissed me before work, told me she loved me, all while she was giving herself to someone else. And just like that, any doubt, any lingering attachment burned away. She had made her choice, and tonight I had made mine. I wasn't stupid. I knew the next few days would be hard, that the reality of what had happened would hit me like a freight train when the adrenaline wore off. That I'd wake up in some unfamiliar place, reach for her out of habit, and feel the cold emptiness of the bed instead. That I'd have to explain to friends, to family, to anyone who asked why my marriage had fallen apart. But none of that scared me. What scared me was the thought of staying, of letting her tears convince me to stay trapped in something that had already died, of waking up every morning knowing that I had let her betrayal slide, that I had let myself become the kind of man who accepted being second choice. That would have been the real loss. So I kept driving. No destination in mind, just a road stretching ahead of me, wide open and waiting. For the first time in a long time, I had no idea what was next. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that.